all about Toughest Mudder Atlanta, and I sit down with Allison Tai, second place female.
This is the world's toughest podcast. Welcome to the world's toughest podcast, where we talk about any obstacle course race you'd like, as long as that's world's toughest mudder. Each week we talk to members of the WTM community and share stories of success and failure in the single greatest event in OCR. My name is Will Hicks, and this is the world's toughest podcast.
Toughest Mudder Atlanta was this past weekend, and it was even better than Toughest LA. We're going to talk all about it in a minute, but first let me tell you about this episode. I talked with Allison Tai, the second place overall finisher this weekend, and a fan of the World's Toughest podcast, about the race and her thoughts on it. And I also talked to a bunch of people who ran this weekend for 2 or 3 minutes apiece. It was late last night. I put up a post on the Toughest Mudder Facebook group asking who was up. And I got a few responses. Next time I do that, it'll be on the World's Toughest Podcast Facebook page. So be sure to follow us over there or follow me on Twitter at @TheWillHicks. Also in this episode, we talk about free shoes, free entry to Toughest Mudder Philly, and a free ticket to Toughest Mudder Europe. But before we get to the phone calls, let's talk about Toughest Mudder Atlanta. The winners for the men, Ryan Atkins was in first place with 50 miles. Ryan Woods got second with 45 miles. Luke Bosick with 45 miles. Tyler Nash got 45 miles in fourth place. And in fifth place, Van Tran with 45 miles. On the women's side, Lindsay Webster got first place with 45 miles. Allison Tai got second place with 40 miles. Lindsay and Allison were 6th and 7th place overall, including all the men also. So Lindsay with first, Allison in second. Alex Rodena with 35 miles. Casey Northrup in 4th place with 35 miles. And Sarah Knight in 5th place with 35 miles. So, for the elite contenders so far, to qualify as an elite contender, you need to finish in the top 5 at a Toughest Mudder event, which will qualify you as an elite contender for World's Toughest Mudder 2017. For the men, there are 9 elite contenders so far. Ryan Atkins, who qualified in LA and Atlanta, Chad Trammell, Glenn Race, Austin Azar, Mark Jones, Ryan Woods, Luke Bosick, Tyler Nash, and Van Tran. For the women, we've got 7 different elite contenders. Lindsay Webster, Sarah Knight, and Allison Tai all qualified in LA and Atlanta. Kayla Coblin, April Hartwig, Alex Rodena, and Casey Northrup are also elite contenders. As far as the contenders, those are people who have completed 25 miles or more at a Toughest Mudder. In Atlanta, 271 people out of 506 people qualified as contenders. So 54% of the field in Atlanta completed 25 miles or more. In LA, 153 people out of 336 people qualified as contenders, so 46%. So total contenders so far, 424 contenders out of 842 runners. A little bit more than 50% of people who have run Toughest Mudder have qualified as contenders. There's one other thing to consider as far as the elite contenders. They are chasing some bonus money over the course of the year for their performance at Toughest Mudder or the Toughest Mudder series. The big prize is the $50,000 bonus at World's Toughest Mudder for the man who wins the race and completes 110 miles, or the woman who wins the race and completes 100 miles. And to qualify for that prize, you have to run the miles, but you also have to be an elite contender going into World's Toughest Mudder. The other bonus prize is a $10,000 bonus prize for the man or woman who put up the most miles over their top 3 Toughest Mudder performances. For the men, Ryan Atkins has 100 miles over 2 races, and Ryan Woods has 85 miles. For the women, Lindsay Webster has 85 miles over 2 races. Allison Tai has 75. Alex Rodena has 70, and Sarah Knight has 70. So that we'll have to see how it shakes out as the 4 other Toughest Mudder races come. We'll see how everyone performs there. 2 people we were expecting to see on the podium were Trevor Sykos and Stephanie Bishop, the reigning men and women's World Toughest Mudder champions. Trevor finished in 6th place for the men with 40 miles. Stephanie DNF'd after 2 hours with 10 miles. Those are the elites. They were amazing. And as usual, just this side of superhuman. Let's talk about the course. I want to talk about it in 3 parts. The terrain, the obstacles, and then other details. First, the terrain. Before the race, the course was described to me as having rolling hills. And while that's accurate, it wasn't how I imagined it would be. When I hear rolling hills, I think of The Sound of Music. Rolling hills. These were more the planet from Star Wars with the Ewoks rolling hills. There were lots of trees and running through the forests on the course with rolling hills through the trees. Endor. The planet from Star Wars is called Endor. I can hear you yelling at me through your cell phone, buddy. Let me tell you 2 terrain stories. On the first loop, you were in the forest for the first 2 miles or so before you came out into a giant field. There was this dirt, or maybe it was a gravel road for a while that we ran alongside the forest, and it was dark. During the first lap, there was this heavy fog all over the field, and you were running toward this giant light that was illuminating an obstacle, but it was so bright you couldn't tell what it was illuminating. You just saw a giant light shining in your face. So you're running toward the light there's heavy fog on your right and a dark, dark forest on your left. And all of a sudden, I could hear something in the woods next to me, like tracking with me as I ran. It was scary. It felt like I was in the X-Files or the first 10 minutes of a horror movie. I don't know what kind of an animal or a serial killer it was, but I was glad I was running with 2 other guys at the time because I knew I didn't have to outrun the monster in the woods, just one of those 2 guys. Later on the second loop, I was minding my own business, just running through the woods, and when I hear this loud crashing off the trail on my right, I jumped, but it was a deer just bounding through the woods like he didn't have a care in the world. And right at that moment, as this deer is passing me on my right, I get passed on my left by Ryan Atkins, who also saw the deer. And Ryan says something like, "Geez, I wish I could run like that." And then he passed me, bounding down the trail like he didn't have a care in the world. So the terrain was great. Very pretty, very scenic, but much, much easier than Toughest Mudder Los Angeles, which is why they ramped up the difficulty on the obstacles. So let's talk about the obstacles. Eli and Nolan of TMHQ did a great job of taking obstacles that we know and that we're familiar with and making them very difficult. I want to briefly talk through the obstacles and then tell you about them. The first obstacle on loop 1, again, just to review, there's 2 loops, 2 5-mile loops. You run the first loop from midnight to 4 a.m. and the second 5-mile loop from 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. On loop 1, the first obstacle was Berlin Walls, and there were 4 of them. So first you went over the regular Berlin Walls, so 1, 2 Berlin Walls. Then they loop you back around, and you immediately go back over the 3rd and 4th Berlin Wall that were set up as the hero walls, which with the shelf coming out towards you, the 2-foot shelf. So you can't, it requires almost just a muscle up. It's a lot more difficult to get over the 3rd and 4th wall. Berlin Walls had a penalty option if you could not complete the obstacle. The second obstacle was Pyramid Scheme. It had the ropes thrown down that they've been using for the Tougher Mudder events. So it was not very difficult, but there was a penalty option if you could not complete it. Third obstacle was Devil's Beard, which seemed longer than usual. The fourth obstacle was Hold Your Wood. It was a log carry around a loop where you pick up the log, you walk it around, and then drop it off where you started. I'm glad they brought this back. I liked that they had Hold Your Wood, not because I necessarily liked the obstacle, but I'm glad that they brought it back kind of from the back wherever they store all the old obstacles, and just because it means they might bring back something else that they haven't used in a while. I was surprised that Crybaby only lasted a year. Crybaby was their tear gas kind of obstacle. The first time I saw Crybaby, it was in Temecula in California, and they had the volunteers wearing hazmat suits and breathing masks, and they had all this biohazard signage, and it was a scary looking obstacle. It wasn't really that bad once you do it, but the mental part of it was pretty intense. So I like the fact that they're bringing back old obstacles that they can just, drop them in for 1 or 2 toughest events and then, retire them, bring them out of the vault, as Disney says with their movies. The fifth obstacle was Lumberjacked. It's 3 large trees, horizontal, about chest height, kind of like hurdles that you had to go over. The sixth obstacle was bail bonds. Bail bonds was very similar to the giant tires they had at Toughest Mudder Los Angeles. You just kind of go up and over these round hay bales. It was actually a good obstacle. It was not that hard. It slowed you down, but it smelled good. It was soft. You could have taken a nap in there if you wanted to. Seventh obstacle was Block Ness Monster. Earlier on Saturday at the regular Tough Mudder event, there was a lot of talk about how deep the water was. They had the usual sign that said water is chest deep or waist deep, but people would jump in and bloop, go right underwater, and someone would have to pull them out. So there was a lot of talk about that, and I think during the afternoon, on Saturday afternoon before Toughest started, they removed some water because the water was it was a normal depth for the water, but it was very difficult to get out of the hole that they dug after you'd gone over the two blocks. They had ropes hanging into the water you could climb out of, but everything was so slippery it was tough to get a handle to get out of the water. Next obstacle was skid marked with the wall that leans toward you, an inverted wall. And even that seemed harder than usual. I think it seemed like it was at a slightly different angle. Like it was steeper to get up. It wasn't leaning down as far as it usually did. So I think they even ramped up the difficulty on that a little bit. Skid marked had a penalty option. The 10th obstacle on Loop 1 was Kiss of Mud 2.0. Kiss of Mud is you're crawling under barbed wire. And like Tougher Mudder, they send you down one side, then you get up, stand around, turn around, basically go right back down the other side. You have to do it twice. In Los Angeles, you only had to do it once, but again, they're making you do a lot of these obstacles twice or on a higher difficulty level than usual. After Mud Mile was Prairie Dog. Prairie Dog, I hadn't done it before. I hadn't heard the name at least. It's very similar to Shawshanked or the first part of Turducken. You slide down a tube and just kind of plop out into the water. The 12th obstacle on Loop 1 was Mud Mile 2.0, and this one was a nightmare. Every time I came to this, I dreaded it. They've been digging these trenches so deep over the last year or so that you cannot, once you climb down into the hole, and you have to go up over the ridge and back into a hole and over the ridge and over into a hole, you can't get out by yourself. You need at least one person to either boost you up or to pull you up. And now some people, like the smaller guys or maybe the stronger guys, can kind of scamper up, but I think for probably 85-90% of us, you need help to get out of them or just to complete the obstacle. And it was long. I didn't count the holes, how many holes you went through, but there were at least 10 per side, so you had to do 20, and it seemed like probably even more. I don't know. I should have counted them while I was out there. But it was a very difficult obstacle, and it was just like a time sink. Like, it took probably 20 minutes for me to get through it, and I'm average at best. I'm sure some people got through it faster and some people slower. I'm recording this on Tuesday, and I still have mud in my ears from Mud Mile. The 13th obstacle was Pitfall, which was walking through a big mud puddle with hidden holes under the water. And the last obstacle on Loop 1 was Everest. And Everest had the grappler option. You could throw a rope up and kind of pull yourself up the wall that way. There was also a penalty option for Everest. And then you'd get to the pit area. And then after 345 is when they opened the second loop up. The first obstacle on the second loop was Balls to the Wall, the penalty option. Next was Augustus Gloop, followed by Operation. And Operation also had a penalty option. The fourth obstacle was Stage 5 Clinger. And here's another example of them increasing the difficulty level for Atlanta. In Los Angeles, you just had to go up the easy version of Stage 5 Clinger to complete the obstacle. In Atlanta, you had to do the hard version of Stage 5 Clinger, and then you had to do the easy version of Stage 5 Clinger. There was a penalty option if you could not complete it. After Stage 5 Clinger was King of the Swingers. It was the same setup as Toughest LA with the sideways cargo net to grab onto, and a penalty if you couldn't stick the landing. Next obstacle was Arctic Enema, and this was the warmest Arctic Enema I've ever been in. Maybe it's just because of the time I went through, but there was not that much ice. It was actually refreshing. It was nice, and by the time I got there, the sun was up. One thing that was different was it seemed like the wood wall in Arctic Enema was lower. So I had to put my body almost against the bottom of the bin to slide underneath the piece of wood. But it didn't give me a brain freeze, so like Toughest LA, so I was good. After Arctic Enema was another log carry, followed by Funky Monkey, the Revolution. Funky Monkey had a penalty option also. Next obstacle was Ladder to Hell, followed by Quagmire, which was just walking through a mud pit again. The next to last obstacle on the second loop was Birth Canal, but you had to do it twice. You had to do one time through the easy side and then one time through the black hole side. And the last obstacle was Kong, with Jay Mazza up there encouraging everyone across. Well done, Jay. That's just a rough description of what was there. As always, Tough Mudder did an excellent job. Good job, Team HQ. We had a blast. Let's talk about some other details of the race. The weather. The weather was great. It was warm. It was in the 60s the whole time from midnight to 8 a.m. There was no rain. There was a chance. We thought there might be a chance of rain leading up to it, but there was no rain. No wind to speak of. Maybe a little bit, but nothing that would bother you. I ran all night in a pair of shorts and a t-shirt, and that was fine. I got cold for maybe 15, 20 minutes at 5 in the morning, so no big deal. I saw a handful of guys who started the race wearing wetsuits, and they were hating life 10, 15 minutes into the race. So I didn't see anyone finish the race in a wetsuit, I'll tell you that. But still, you need to bring a wetsuit. Philly will probably be colder. Chicago will be colder. Whistler will definitely be colder. So even if it's warm, bring a wetsuit. You might need it. We didn't need one in Atlanta, but you definitely needed one in LA, and you'll probably need it before the toughest season is over. You could tell that Tough Mudder took feedback from LA and used it to make Atlanta better. The bathrooms were cleaned between the regular Tough Mudder and the toughest Mudder on Saturday night. The pit area check-in was much more orderly than last time. The course was well marked with signage and with Siloom glow sticks. The things from LA that needed to be fixed, they fixed them for Atlanta. It was well done. They took the feedback and they made the course better. The awards ceremony was good. It was also short and brief. Everyone was really looking to get out of there as soon as possible after the race was over. Tough Mudder was smart to recognize that. Something new they added was quick pits for the top competitors. At 6 a.m., they set up a small area on the side of the course across from the race officials tent, where each of the top 5 contenders for the men and women could have their pit area right next to the course, so they didn't have to, walk off, 50 yards to the pit area to get their stuff. They could just have it right there. Most of the top contenders had someone working pit for them anyway, who was kind of holding a bag or holding supplies for them right next to the course. Ryan Woods did not. Ryan Woods was running over, like the rest of us, running over to the pit area, grabbing his stuff to resupply and running back on the course. So he ended up getting some help toward the end of the race. He finished in second place. But he definitely spent some time going over to his stuff to the pit area during the race, the first 6 hours. One thing Tough Mudder could do better for next time, the finish line MC didn't seem very familiar with Tough Mudder. In LA, they had Sean Corvell up all night with us, very similar to Vegas at World's Toughest Mudder. In Atlanta, they had a guy who was, he was technically proficient. He was fine, but he didn't know really who any of the racers were. He kept using cliches like teamwork makes the dream work and just stuff like that. I'm not saying he needs to know the name of every racer or even the name of every elite racer, but you need to know who Ryan Atkins is, especially when he's standing right next to you. They were looking for, after the race was over for the podium ceremony, they were looking for Ryan and Lindsay. And Ryan and Lindsay were changing clothes after the race, and Ryan came up, and he was standing there right next to the podium, and the announcer's like, "We're still looking for Ryan and Lindsay. We're still looking for Ryan and Lindsay." And Ryan's like, "I'm right here, man." So we had Sean at the start line, who was great as always, and Clinton actually showed up at the very end. He was just in the audience though because he was working the regular Tough Mudder on Sunday. So I don't know how they can, I know it's tough to have Sean stay up all night and work all night Saturday night, and then all day Sunday. And I'm sure between Sean and Clinton, they could probably figure out a way to cover it. But that's one area that the race could be improved in. But that's the only real needs improvement feedback that I have. These events are great. I'm also going to do Chicago this year. But next year, I may just do all the toughest and take it easy on the regular Tough Mudder events, except for the ones that are, right in my neighborhood. But as far as traveling, I think Toughest Mudder is going to be the priority over, Tough Mudder Arizona or wherever. Before we get to the phone calls, there were some Tougher Mudder rule changes. Tougher Mudder is the first wave of the day on Saturday. It's a competitive wave that is part of the Holy Grail that you have to complete 3 events, the Tougher Mudder, Toughest Mudder, and World's Toughest Mudder to get a Holy Grail. On Saturday morning, Team HQ rolled out some tweaks to the rules. If you failed Funky Monkey or Kong, you no longer had the option to retry the obstacle. Instead, you were directed to a penalty lane, much like Toughest Mudder or World's Toughest Mudder. As long as you successfully completed either the obstacle or the penalty loop, you were able to keep your wristband, and at the end of the race, you were able to get your Tougher Mudder headband and your finisher t-shirt. And like before, with King of the Swingers, you just had to jump into the water. You didn't actually have to hit the bell. Just as before, finishing the course successfully meets the Tougher Mudder requirements for the Holy Grail. So if you have done a Tougher Mudder and did not get your headband because you couldn't finish Funky Monkey or couldn't finish Kong, then you should give it another shot and get that headband, and it'll feel good. Next week on the show, we're giving away 3 pair of Merrell Agility Peak Flex shoes. Let me tell you a shoe story. My first pair of OCR shoes was the Salomon Speedcross 3s. Actually, that's a lie. My first pair of OCR shoes was a white and red pair of Reeboks or Adidas something. They were already beat up, and so I didn't care much about them. But after I did 3 or 4 races with those shoes, I got a pair of Salomon Speedcross 3s, and they were great. I used them every race. I actually wore through them, through the top of them. Like my little toes on the outside left and outside right wore through the tops of both shoes. So I retired them, and I bought another pair of Speedcross 3s, but I don't know what happened or what changed, but these ones did not fit me right, and I got blisters just from using them. So I got a pair of the Salomon Speedcross 4s, thinking that might be better. Same thing, blisters. So I bought a pair of Innovates, heard good things about them. Great trail shoes. Those are not good for the obstacles. I got a pair of Ice Bugs. I got 2 pair of Ice Bugs, actually. They were too narrow for my feet. I have wide feet, I guess. I didn't realize that until I bought Ice Bugs. So I could not fare. So for like years, I just kind of kept going from shoe to shoe. I couldn't find a pair that worked for me until Merrell signed a deal with Tough Mudder, and I noticed them. So I was like, okay, fine, Merrell, I'll give you a shot. So I got a pair of the Merrell All Out Crush, and they were great. I could finally run again without getting blisters on an obstacle course race. And I've been using those for like a year and a half maybe, until just recently, the World's Toughest Podcast got a deal with Merrell. We got this deal with Merrell where they were going to give out shoes through our podcast. And we're very excited about it. We're giving away 3 pair of shoes next week. But the shoes that we're giving away are the Agility Peak Flex shoes. And I wasn't familiar with them. So I told the people at Merrell, I was like, well, I'm going to have to get a pair of those so I know what I'm talking about. I can talk about them intelligently on the show. So I bought my own pair, and I ran with them this week in Atlanta. And they were great. They were so good. It was so nice to have a pair of shoes that I could run in, that had padding, that I did not get blisters in. The All Out Crushes are great. I still like them. I still have them. But they're more of a short distance shoe, like a Tough Mudder, a regular Tough Mudder, or a Tough Mudder half. They're lighter than the Agility Peak Flex. That's actually a pro con. The Agility Peak Flex has more padding, but it's not as light as the All Out Crush. So if that's important to you, maybe you want to go with the All Out Crush. For the longer events like this, at least for me, for the 8 hour, the 24 hours, I like the Agility Peak Flex shoes. So that's what we're giving away, because this is the World's Toughest Podcast, not the Somewhat Tough Podcast. If you would like to win a pair of Merrell Agility Peak Flex shoes, email me at worldstoughestpodcast@gmail.com with the word Merrell in the subject line. And in the body of the email, you need to write 3 things down. Write your name, your email address, and your cell phone number. That will subscribe you to our winners list that we have contest winners selected from. It will make you eligible for prizes like the shoes and the free entry to Toughest Mudder Atlanta that we gave away last week. Speaking of giveaways, do you want a ticket to Toughest Mudder Philly or a ticket to Toughest Mudder Europe? When I say ticket, I mean a race entry. I am not buying you a plane ticket, friend. These are my tickets. Here's the deal. I paid cash for them. Actually, I paid with my credit card, but I paid for them. These are my tickets. They're in my name right now. If you would like to attend Toughest Mudder Europe or Toughest Mudder Philly on my ticket, on my dime, shoot me an email at worldstoughestpodcast@gmail.com with Toughest Europe or Toughest Philly in the subject line. Don't get greedy. Pick one. I'm giving them both away, but this isn't a contest. I'm selecting who gets the tickets. If you'd like the ticket, you're going to have to earn it. If you're selected, I'm going to need you to get audio for me while you're at the event, because I'm not going to be there. I won't be at Philly, and I won't be in Europe. So if I'm paying for your ticket, I need you to get me audio while you're there, before the event and after the event. I realize you're racing. I don't want to impinge on that 8 hours. Now, if you have a pit crew that goes with you, awesome. Maybe they can get some audio for you during the race, just talking to other people, other racers that are there, but no pressure. Maybe you can get an interview with the winners, just like 2 minutes. Like, hey, what'd you think of the course? What's your favorite obstacle? What happened when you got passed and you finished in second place? How did that feel? How did it feel to cross the finish line in first place? Just simple questions like that. I'll even help you prep for it. But if you would like to go to Toughest Mudder Philly or Toughest Mudder Europe, shoot me an email, worldstoughestpodcast@gmail.com with Toughest Europe in the subject line or Toughest Philly in the subject line. Give me a proposal with what you feel you can provide the show as far as audio, and I'll get back with you. Also, I'd like to give them to someone who's a big fan of the podcast, so let me know if that's the case or not. Before we get to the phone calls, let's read some podcast reviews from iTunes. Toughest South, 5 stars, by Longrobe. Bobby Long from Asheville here. Saw you at Hold Your Wood at Toughest South on Loop 1 on Sunday morning. Yelled at you that I enjoyed your podcast. 5 stars. Truly enjoy the effort, enthusiasm, and your ability to realize when to ask questions and when to sit back and listen. 5 stars. Thank you, Bobby Long. Very kind. And then another review from Canada. No one loves EST. 5 stars. By Dead Bunny Pilster. Love the podcast. Full of great info and crazy personality guests that show you exactly how much of a global family the Legionnaires are. This podcast both increases how nervous and excited I am to go for that Tough Mudder Grail. Keep up the great work, Will. Thank you, Dead Bunny Pilster from Canada. If you would like to leave a review for us, go to iTunes and search for Tough Mudder. We are the first podcast that pops up. Click on our podcast logo, then click on ratings and reviews. It'll take you literally 20 seconds to leave a review. And I appreciate it, sincerely. Thank you very much. Let's get to these quick hit phone calls with Eric Wilkin, Melissa Sharkbait Dugan, and Jonathan Broadhacker. These guys just happened to be awake when I was recording, and they replied to my Facebook post. If you'd like to hear about this next time it happens, be sure to like the World's Toughest Podcasts page on Facebook. And also let me know what you think about it. These are just like 3-4 minute phone calls. We just talk briefly about Atlanta, high points, low points. And let me know what you think. Shoot me an email at willhicks@gmail.com or leave us a review on iTunes and give me your opinion. I would appreciate it. Sincerely, it helps me know what's good and what's bad. I appreciate your feedback. I value it. So let's talk to Eric, Melissa, and Jonathan.
Hello?
Eric Wilkin, how are you?
I'm good, Will. How are you doing?
I'm awesome. Hey, Eric, what was your favorite obstacle this week at Toughest Mudder Atlanta?
My favorite obstacle was the obstacle I hated the most. It was the Mud Mile 2.0.
Why did you like that?
Brutal. I liked it because it was the hardest thing to do. It was something that I'd never seen before. Like a Spartan race, you kind of know what everything's going to be, but at the Toughest Mudder, it completely dumbfounded me. I was just like, holy crap, how do I get out of this thing? And you had to have other people around. I mean, there's no way you could do it on your own. I was so used to doing things on my own, so it was tough.
Talk about how long.
It was definitely my favorite obstacle.
How long was that obstacle?
I bet it took me probably 10 minutes to get through it. But I mean, it was taking people, that long or even longer, because you had to go down probably 4 or 5 of these ditches and, climb out of them, and it's just a slick, snotty mud you couldn't grab onto. I mean, you literally had have somebody help you up. But then you had to go all the way back around and go through another loop of it. So people were saying it was like a double mud mile. Like I said, I've never done one before, but it was wicked. It took at least 10 minutes, if not longer.
How many miles did you get done?
I got 35 miles in.
If I got through Mud Mile in 10 minutes, I would have been thrilled. I think it probably took me at least 20 every time I came to it. You're right. That obstacle was insane.
It was awful. It was so awful. But by the time I was going through my last loops, I could get through it all on my own because there were so many little crevices dug into the mud and places where you could actually get your knee or you could jump up because so much of the water had splashed out, or people had carried the water out of the obstacle on themselves that you were kind of able to get through it. But it was tough. Good on Tough Mudder. That was very impressive.
That was your first Tough Mudder you've run?
That was the first one I ever run. Yeah, I was incredibly impressed. I mean, their course design was amazing. Their routes were amazing. Their obstacle design is far and away the best I've ever seen. So if they keep doing this kind of stuff, I mean, the other race series are really going to have to step it up.
What did you think about King of the Swingers?
I loved King of the Swingers. That was definitely one of my favorite obstacles. I got through it every time, which I didn't expect to be able to do, but it was intense. By I think the third time I went through it, the cable was so slick that literally just put your feet on there and you grabbed a hold of it and it just slid right down, and there was no friction because it was so muddy and messy. But that was epic.
What's your best story from the weekend?
My best story from the weekend. Oh, this is great. Okay, so my girlfriend was my pit, and we kind of picked a spot that we thought would be good to exchange things in a hurry after each loop, and she was talking to this woman like the whole race, and she's just telling about things they're talking about, and her husband was running, and he kept coming through, and he was like 2 loops ahead of me, or maybe it was 1 loop ahead of me. And we got to talking about it. And at the very, very end, when we're walking out, I'm like, I wonder if that guy was Evan Perperis. And she's like, yeah, it was Evan Perperis' girlfriend. Like, oh man, I kept missing him. So I never got a chance to say hi to that guy. I've never actually met him before, but they were talking the whole time, and she didn't know who he was. I really wanted to meet him, so it was like, oh man, I missed my opportunity to say hi to him.
Evan Perperis.
We got a pretty good laugh out of that.
He hosts a podcast called the Strength and Speed Podcast. He's actually written a book about obstacle course racing. He's pretty well known in the greater OCR community.
Yeah, well, I really wanted to meet him, but he really is one heck of a runner. So I think he got like 10th or 11th maybe.
Well, Eric Wilkin, thanks for your time.
Hey, no problem. Well, good talk to you, and have a good week.
Hey, Melissa Dugan, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Melissa Sharkbait Dugan, as you're known.
Yes, and now I have a shark sign. I got to take the shark sign.
Did you take that home with you?
Well, Joe Perry got it for me. I got Nolan's approval at the end of the race, and Joe went out and did a Sunday Fun Day, which I did not do. So I asked him to pick it up for me, and he did.
I think you would have taken that home with or without Nolan's approval.
Yeah, but it's always sometimes, it's ask for forgiveness before permission, but I knew I'd want to display it. And I didn't want to not be able to share it with people because it was on display. So that was a little different.
Tell everyone how many miles you got this time.
25 again.
Congratulations.
Yeah. I'm currently icing my IT band. It is not happy.
What was your favorite obstacle at Toughest Atlanta?
I liked Mud Mile. It was a time sucker, but I actually really enjoyed it because it was deep enough to make it challenging for one person, but if you got a good rhythm with someone, it wasn't like me and Sarah Watson. I push her up and over, and then she would grab my hand, and literally as she slid down the other side with her body weight would pull me over. And it was just this constant motion, and it was really fun, and it was really muddy. It was really good.
That was your favorite? That was probably my least favorite obstacle.
It was a time sucker, but it was good to break up the running because there was a lot of running.
What was your least favorite obstacle?
I got really pissed off at Funky Monkey, and that's usually my favorite. I wasn't expecting the dew with the humidity. So like the first go round, I got to the second wheel and I started yelling, "Why is it wet?" Because I'm like, and I started yelling at the volunteer, "Who the hell went through this with wet hands?" And he's like, "Nobody, it's the humidity." And I freaking slipped off and I was so mad. But that, I mean, and the new Berlin walls are, I mean, it's okay. It's not as bad with help, but with the ledge, it's really difficult. It's a lot of upper body.
It wasn't just the new Berlin walls. They also sent you through the old Berlin walls first. Yeah,
and you know what? I was wondering how Tough Mudder was going to, how are you going to try to compare different venues? Like LA, it was so hard with those hills. And I was thinking, it's going to be so much easier to get mileage in Atlanta. Well, that's how they did it. They sucked up time with you doing so many more obstacles. I think they did a wonderful job with that because people still got, I think, comparable miles.
And then probably at Whistler, they'll probably go back to the LA model where it's the simpler obstacles, but.
Yeah, I don't even know how they're going to try to make that easier. I don't even know how they're going to do that.
What's your favorite story from the weekend?
I got to run with Maxine Colby, and she was so sick. I mean, she went into the race with this nasty, nasty sickness, and she's been sick all year. She's had frostbite. She's had infections, sinus infections, all this stuff. And she ran it, and she still got her 25 miles, and she puked like the whole way. Like, I was with her and Cody at some point, and I kind of went ahead of them and said, "Hey, just catch up with me," while she's puking. And she just puked the whole way. And it was a good, just to see, and she's young, and she really has a good future. And just, I'm not giving her total props. If you're that sick, maybe you shouldn't be running. And I love her for pushing herself, but she definitely, dug deep and did that. I heard there were really good stories on Sunday for Fun Day when I wasn't there. I heard Blind Pete was there. They pushed a woman with a wheelchair through with Zach from More Heart Than Scars. So I know there are really good stories out there. But from what I got to see personally, just watching Max, push herself through sickness, I don't know if I could. I've never done that. I don't know if I ever could.
Melissa Dugan, thanks so much.
You're welcome. Good to see you.
Hello.
Hey, Jonathan Broadhacker. How are you?
Hey, what's up, Will?
Good to talk to you again.
You too, man.
How was Toughest Atlanta?
It was pretty amazing. It was a lot more challenging than I expected Atlanta, Georgia to be, that's for sure.
How many miles did you
get? 25.
Good job.
Yeah.
What was your favorite obstacle?
I really enjoyed Block Ness. I listened to your show beforehand, and I expected it to be a lot more challenging, honestly. But, the world's toughest and just Tough Mudder community in general came through on that one. I don't think there was ever a time where it wasn't spinning or there was somebody there just making it move. So,
I think they might have removed some water.
Did they? Yeah, it's
Saturday morning and Saturday night.
So I'm pretty short, and I was able to touch still. So they must have done something.
What was your least favorite obstacle?
Stage 5 back to back was pretty bad. Stage 5 reach around, that was terrible, and of course Operation. But who likes Operation that much?
They sent us up the hard version of Stage 5 Klinger, and then they sent us first.
Yeah.
And then you had to do the easy version right after that.
Yeah, it was super awesome. Or apparently there was just a little tiny run you could do and just skip both of them. So
there's an option.
Yeah.
What did you think of King of the Swingers?
It was fun. Was able to grab the net at least. That's furthest I've been able to get on it is grab the net. I've yet to hoist my body up and slide down it. But, if I keep getting the net, eventually it's going to click, right? One of these times.
I did the same thing. I got out there, I grabbed the net, and I was hanging on to the net with one hand and the bar with the other, and I was like, now what do I do?
Well, I actually, both times I was able to grab the net and actually transition a couple rungs to it, and then I can never just get my legs up enough to lock them in. But it'll happen one of these times, I'm sure. So,
what's your best story from the weekend?
Oh man, there's so many stories. Just all the great people that were there. I'd probably say one of the best stories is me and my wife were running. We ran together for the last lap at the very least, and we were just running, finishing it up, and Ryan Atkins actually comes running by us, and he's talking, just having a good time like Ryan Atkins can while still crushing a course.
Sure.
And he's just talking about, oh well, I think I've got this, and he's like, should I try to do another lap or not? Is it a good idea? And a bunch of us around him are just like, you've got plenty of time. Prove him wrong, because I think by the time he was going to finish, he was going to have maybe, I don't know, 45 or 50 minutes left before 8:30 cutoff time. We're like, no, just do it. You can do it. Got to prove him wrong. Get that last lap in. And he's like, no, I think you guys are right. I'm going to. And just kept running off. And then I never saw him again. But I guess he did, because he got to 50 miles. And he was at 45.
That was really funny, because at the start line, Nolan from Tough Mudder headquarters, he said to everybody, the start line is going to close at 7:45 because it's humanly impossible to get a lap done in 45 minutes.
Exactly.
And everyone kind of chuckled, like, ha, 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 does this guy not know who Ryan Atkins is?
Right.
And so
did you, I never heard, do you know what he ran that last lap in, like officially? Like what his time was?
You know what? I do not know.
He didn't start until almost 7:45, so it had to be just something ridiculous, right? Just...
Oh, yeah. He did something similar in Los Angeles, but the course was a lot flatter in Atlanta, and I think the obstacles closed after 8 o'clock.
I did hear almost all the obstacles closed at 8 o'clock, so I guess that would have made it a lot easier.
But especially because the reason the course was so difficult in Atlanta was like going up Stage 5 Clinger twice.
Sure,
or going through Mud Mile twice.
Mud Mile twice. Another fun part of the course.
That was ridiculous.
Yes, it was. How did you end up doing, by the way? I meant to ask you.
I got 20 miles.
Nice.
Yeah, it was my own fault. I dogged it on my third lap, but I'm going to Chicago. I'll get my 25 there. So.
Oh, sure. Unless they do another sprint lap like they did in Georgia for us. See
what happens. All right. Well, Jonathan, thanks much.
Hey, no problem. Anytime, Will. Thanks for talking to me.
Allison Tai.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Hey, thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on. I've honestly listened to your show since it started coming out, and I just love it. You've got a great voice for radio, and you always have really good content. And the Toughest Mudder community definitely needed a podcast. So
I have a face for radio as well, so it works out.
Nice, I like it.
So, Allison Tai, tell me about Toughest Mudder Atlanta.
It was a tougher race than I thought, because just looking at the elevation profile, I think a lot of us were like, oh, we're going to have so many more miles than we did in LA, just because the terrain is so much more runnable. And it was great, and it was a fun race, but it was tougher than expected. They really kind of stacked the obstacles. When you went over the reach around or whatever, it was always doubles, and as you know, they'd send you back through. So I think they really balanced it out in terms of just kind of upping the ante on the obstacles. And my goodness, that pitfall with all the mud pits.
The Mud Mile.
That was, yeah. Was it Mud Mile or was it Pitfall? The one with all the holes in it?
That was Mud Mile.
I guess
Pitfall was like a puddle we kind of walked through.
Yeah, but but kind of on steroids. So it was a lot harder, obviously, when they make the pits deeper and you're trying to like muscle your way out of a slippery basin full of mud. So yeah, they definitely made it harder. But as always, I just love the people that come out in the community, and it was a great race, lots of fun obstacles, and just an event like nothing else, really.
Did you have a favorite obstacle?
You know what? I really liked hang time this time. I tried to really, really work on my jump to get out to that first bar, because in LA I couldn't even reach the bar. And so I really worked on just kind of extending through the jump and getting the bar. So I'm not sure if it was slightly closer than it was in LA, the first trapeze bar, or if, I just worked on my technique enough that I could actually reach it. But it was challenging, but it was a really fun obstacle, and I just like how dynamic it was, right? So
you're talking about King of the Swingers with the cargo net?
Yeah, that one. So I'm not a lover of that one, because I used to hate the fact that you hit the bell and then fall in the water.
Sure.
And I would almost never hit the bell. So I really like this one because you have the opportunity to stay dry, and just the combination of different factors, catching the bar, swinging on the bar, catching the cargo net, climbing up the cargo net, and then traversing down the line at the end. It just has those different elements. It's a really, really neat obstacle that just kind of combines a bunch of different techniques.
Were you able to nail it, to complete it?
I did, yeah, except for one time I didn't actually catch the net. So I did the typical where you miss the net and then somehow try to swing the bar back and eventually just let go and give up. So, but the other times I did, and last in LA, the last toughest, I could not even get to the bar. So I was really pleased and happy that I actually made it through that one a couple times.
In LA, you almost had to get a running leap to get to it.
Was the bar farther away, or is that just in my head?
No, I think it was.
Okay, yeah, because this time it seemed like I was almost shocked that I grabbed the bar, because in LA they wouldn't let me take a run up to it. They were like, no, you got to jump from here, and I just don't have enough jump in these little ultra marathon running legs to propel myself that far. So I wasn't sure if it was just in my head that it was that much closer, or if it was far away.
Did you have a least favorite obstacle?
Yes, the mud mile. Definitely my least favorite. It was just so tough. And I was actually just crushed, because the last time that I went through it, I was like, thank God it's the last. I had, my fingernails were peeling off, and, I was just exhausted. And it was my last time going through. And as I got into the pit, they were like, sorry, my daughter's in the background. They were like, yeah, and now this obstacle is closed. No. So I was the last person through it, and by that time it had almost cleared out, so I had to do the whole thing by myself, and it was a lot easier, I think, working as a team to push somebody over and then they drag you over, rather than just trying to claw your way up and up. So yeah, that one, it was good because it was so challenging and so exhausting, but yeah, it was one of those, it's just a grunt, and you just make it through any which way that you can.
I don't know what it was about that obstacle, but it was emotionally draining too.
Yeah. It just hurt everywhere, really, right in the soul, right?
What did you think about the obstacle difficulty at Atlanta versus Los Angeles?
Yeah, I thought they made up for the lack of terrain, definitely in, they had the same obstacles. It's just the frequency of them. So, instead of just doing reach around once, you're going through it twice. Yeah, it just seemed like they somehow made up for the difference in terrain with the obstacles. But other than that, the course was very runnable, and in a way that almost makes it a little more tiring, because you're running pretty fast between the obstacles, rather than, taking a break and power hiking and using different muscles. So yeah, I found it a little bit different that way too, but always upping the game in any which way that they can. But I was really impressed, because even if you look at Atkins time or mileage, it was fairly similar between the two, and you'd have thought, I think, before going into it, that he would have gotten heaps more miles in Atlanta than he would have in LA. But yeah, I think they just did a really good job in terms of balancing it out. That must be some exact science there.
You know what, Tough Mudder, they're smart. They have this stuff kind of figured out.
Yeah, they really do. That's impressive. I don't even know what formula you would go about using to come to evening the course out like that. But I guess they've just been doing it long enough that they've got it figured out.
What do you think of the toughest series in general?
Oh, I think it's great. I think a lot of us were really living for the World's Toughest Mudder, and it just being only once a year. For me personally, the first year, I finished the whole thing. That was Sandstorm year. And then the next year, I actually injured my ankle just a couple weeks out. And I hadn't run a step before the race itself. And only ended up doing, 20, 25 miles of this, awful shuffle. Just try to keep moving, sort of not even quite a run or a jog, something more like a stumble. And so that didn't work out very well for me. And then last year, I busted my LCL tripping off the ladder portion going down the hill. On the other side, I kind of trapped my foot in between two rocks, and I actually busted my LCL on the side, the ligament on the side of my knee. So I had to walk the rest. And then it just became this oh my God, I have to wait a whole nother year to get back out there and try to give it my best. So this kind of just creates those little intervals every month that you have to look forward to, rather than just that one big race at the end of the year that so many of us in the community live for.
You came in third at Toughest Los Angeles. You came in second at Toughest Atlanta. What will it take to break through and take first place?
God, I don't know. Lindsay's gonna have to be having a really bad day or something. But no, I go out there and I compete and I just try my best. And this one, I just really wanted, like in LA, I was very, very careful with my knee. It was kind of one of my first long runs back. And when I saw those hills, honestly, my heart just like sunk because I thought that I wouldn't be able to make it all the way. Downhill to that point, I still kind of felt my knee. So I was just super jazzed that I could make it through the whole thing. And I'm not a great downhill runner as it is, especially on that stuff that's not really technical. It's just really crashy and just a lot of impact on that knee. So I was just happy that, I made it through. And this time in Atlanta, I just thought, let's let the legs out. I want to run fast off the start. It's only 8 hours, not 24. So I really want to be like running and not jogging. And so that's what I went out and did. And, I was just kind of like waiting for Lindsay to come up behind me, which I guess is a little bit stressful. But at the same time, when it's somebody like Lindsay coming up behind you, you're always kind of looking forward to the moment that she passes you and you get to hang out with her for a few minutes. Right. So yeah, I don't know if it's possible, but I'm just gonna keep focusing on what I'm doing out there and just keep going out and giving it my best and doing the best I can at home. And I'm training with Yancey Culp. So I think the direction that we're going is gonna be really awesome. The kinds of results that we'll see. So I'm already super excited about it. And I think that was also a bit of the difference between LA and Atlanta, is just having Yancey to work with and kind of send me down a different, a different alley for my training.
Tell me about that moment when you were in the lead near the end and then Lindsay passed you. What happens?
Well, it's kind of funny. That was the lap that I missed hang time. So I think that kind of missing hang time. And then I was jogging a little bit after Arctic Enema, trying to, like how you go through and then you're like, oh, the straps are, so I'm trying to redo my headlamp and all that. Mm-hmm. And yeah, she just popped up beside me in typical Lindsay fashion. And the first thing that, honestly kind of went through was just the joy of seeing this amazing person. I think, she's just one of those people that just is like a living Care Bear. She just shoots good. I was kind of tired and I was kind of ready for the event to be done. And, my legs are starting to get tired and stuff. So the instant, like the guttural feeling, I guess, that you have when you see Lindsay is just absolute joy. And that must just be science because that's just the kind of thing that she emits. And then after that, just relief, really, because I knew she was coming up on me eventually. And it was just like, I don't want to be in the lead anymore almost at a certain point, just have her come up and pass me so that I can settle into second. And that is kind of what happened from there. She was nice enough to run with me for a couple kilometers as well. And so I think that really lifted my spirits. And then for the rest of the race, she was moving at a quick pace and she wasn't tired at all. So it just kind of allowed me to just kind of settle in and take second. And, third was a little bit farther back. She was struggling a little bit with the distance. So it was a pretty comfortable spot to be in. So the lead for me was not all that comfortable. So it was almost just a relief. And then just being able to hang out with Lindsay for a couple kilometers definitely just like popped my spirits right back up until the end of the race.
What lessons can you take from Atlanta to hopefully win the next toughest?
I think I kind of just got like mentally tired from playing the race game and being out front for so long that next time I think I'm going to focus in on that a little bit later in the race and just not just try to stay a little bit more relaxed and a little bit more patient, because I kind of had it in my head like it's only 8 hours, like just work hard the entire time. And I think I actually kind of gassed myself out almost mentally before that actually happened. And in a way, that's why I was just so relieved and so happy that Lindsay moved into first, because I was just like so mentally and emotionally exhausted from taking the lead. So I may actually just hold back a little bit and delay moving up as much as I can just to kind of save my mental strength until the end.
Can you talk about that, the mental energy that a race like this takes?
Yeah, I think, it's 8 hours. It's not a long time, but it is a long time, And when you're out there for 2 hours and you're like, oh my goodness, I still have 6 hours to go at this pace. And, I should make sure that I'm doing absolutely everything right so that I can like maintain my lead, and am I going too slow, and am I going too fast? And there's just a lot, even when it comes to like nutrition and hydration, making sure that you're staying on top of those things. There's a lot to factor in. And then you had in the obstacles, and it's just that much more in terms of like mentally breaking down. And I think near the end, I was just getting like kind of dizzy and tired. And, it's different when you're in a running race. It's something because my background is in running, and it's something that you don't even notice because you're just putting one foot ahead of the other. And it doesn't really factor in that much as when you get dizzy and you're trying to do something like Funky Monkey, where you're like, whoa, I'm already spinning. I don't need to be grabbing. So, and then you just need those like extreme, almost like Herculean efforts midway through a long distance race. And I think that not only wears on you physically in terms of having to like put out this anaerobic effort, but also just mentally. If you let it, it can very easily tire you out. So you almost have to save all of your energy for like that forward progression in between obstacles, staying on top of your nutrition and your hydration, and then completing the obstacles as efficiently and relaxed as possible.
The women's field included Stephanie Bishop, Lindsay Webster, Sarah Knight, Alex Sordina, among others. How did it feel racing against so many strong women?
I think it's awesome. Really, like, just having seen the sport progress since when I started in it years and years ago, it's just amazing the level of competition and the people that we're drawing into the sport, and just having, especially at a Tough Mudder event, having like all of these big names and just amazing athletes to compete with was just phenomenal. And it just continues to grow and continues to attract these kind of athletes. But I think what's really, really special about just the sport in general, but especially Tough Mudder, is just the like caliber of people that this sport attracts. Like as much as it's like, it's a race and it's a competition, it really is this like just intense level of camaraderie, and the people that are attracted to the sport for whatever reason are just amazing. And so even just to be able to run out there for 8 hours and kind of push ourselves to exhaustion with a bunch of these ladies that are not only phenomenal athletes, but phenomenal people, I think is really something special and really something unique to this sport, and particularly Tough Mudder. It's something that they've always been really forward about building. So
why do you think that is? Because that's true. It seems to, Tough Mudder, OCR in general, and Tough Mudder in particular, seems to attract quality individuals to compete in their events.
It's funny. I'm not really sure. I mean, obviously, Tough Mudder has made that a big part of their mandate and a big part of who they identify as a company from the very beginning, in terms of just really pushing the camaraderie and the community aspect. But it definitely goes beyond that, just in terms of people being drawn to the sport. And I don't know if it just takes some humility to crawl through mud pits and fall on your face repeatedly into the water when you miss the transition on Funky Monkey or whatever it is. But I don't know. And maybe just the community breeds more people like it. People come that are just awesome, cool people, and they are just around a whole bunch of like-minded individuals. And I think too, we have like kind of a little, almost a taboo in our sport against people that are like super arrogant or not in it for the sport itself or the community. But so I think there's just so many dynamics that feed into that. But I think it's just who we've made the community like build out into is just a big part of who we are as an OCR community, and particularly with Tough Mudder.
You placed second among the women, but also seventh overall. There were 506 people and 409 men, and only 6 people finished in front of you. How does that feel?
That actually was a surprise to me because I had zero idea. But I'm blaming that one on Lindsay for chasing me for like 6.5 hours. That's just the fear of running from Lindsay. But the cool part about that is sometimes in Spartan race, you'll find that women end up coming, a similar finish time as the men, but we're also carrying lighter things. But in Tough Mudder, that's not the case. Like we're doing the exact same obstacles. They're not shorter. There's no kickboards. We're carrying the same amount of weight. So that is just truly an indication that we place 6th and 7th in the men's race. And I think that itself is just super awesome. And I'm always a little bit more competitive, I think, with males than I am with females. I don't know. It seems to be almost another trait amongst the OCR ladies. I think that they were almost more competitive with the male side. But it just shows that as more women and more competitive women get involved in the sport, we're only going to climb up the leaderboard on the men's side, because their field has been stacked forever. And for the female side, it's just starting to grow with all these competitive athletes. And maybe one day Lindsay will win the men's side, and we can all cheer and celebrate.
Amelia almost did one time.
I know, she was second, wasn't she?
After you put a ton of training into a specific event like Toughest, how do you feel when it's over?
I usually just feel good and want to go home and see my kids. So I have 2 young kids, and when they were small, it was really easy to just kind of drag them around on airplanes with my husband and go to these races. So a lot of the times it's just like this weekend, having to leave the kids at home and just being done the race. It's kind of like, okay, now I go home and rest and recover for a couple days and just cuddle my kids as much as I can, because I've usually missed them for the whole weekend. But yeah, usually just, knowing that I went out there and did my best is enough to give me kind of a high for the next few days, and then just inspire me on the things that I need to now work better on. Like last time, it was really that hang time or King of Swingers obstacle that I couldn't get the jump for. So I went home, and my husband, who also coaches me and does like the very specific obstacle stuff, designed something so that it would replicate that obstacle, and I'd be able to throw my training behind that and figure out how to get better. So I think it's, for a lot of us, why we do these races is just to kind of find the chinks in our armor, if you will, or the holes in our training, and try to fill those gaps and just become better athletes.
Tell me about this thing that your husband makes. Or do you have your like a private gym, or what do you do?
We are actually in the process of building an indoor kind of ninja obstacle gym.
Okay.
In the Vancouver area. We have nothing in BC, like nothing in the west coast of Canada. So a friend who was out east, and they have a bunch of gyms out there, convinced us to start this thing. So we're opening that in June, which is which makes life a bit crazy right now, but we're super excited about it. But for right now, my husband's literally just built a million obstacles in our backyard. Like we have 2 warp walls, a traverse wall, different kinds of monkey bars, ropes, pretty much everything that you could see at a race kind of replicated in our yard. And so we just put like a beam or a bar out from the deck and some crash pads underneath it. Mm-hmm. And then I just jump off the deck, grab the bar, and then without a backswing, lâcher and grab the next one. And so he's pretty good about like figuring out what it is that's holding me up in an obstacle and replicating it. So I think that's been a major part of just even my being able to complete obstacles, because I'm really not naturally athletic in that sense. I can jog forever, but that's pretty much all I come into this sport with. I don't have much agility or strength or power or anything like that. So I think him just like really teching the obstacles and figuring out how to like teach them to me and have those basic skills has just been instrumental in my being able to complete these sorts of events.
Do you guys have a website or a Facebook page for your new gym?
Yeah, it's vancityocr.com. So VANCITYOCR.com. And it's like a ninja obstacle gym with training and drop-ins.
You've done the first 2 toughest events here in the U.S. Are you going to England for the next one?
You know what? We were kind of tossing back and forth, but I'm signed up for Philly, and so at this point, I'm probably not going to go to England just because it is the week before. I wish they like put it 2 weeks before, because then I probably would. But just being back to back, and now I tend to recover quite quickly when it comes to like endurance events. Like I'm right back into training today, and I'm feeling fine. But the 1 week turnover may be a little much just for like the mental aspect of trying to get through something like this. That might be a little bit much. And then opening the gym and all that, obviously, all weighs into that. So as much as I would love to go to England and do the toughest, I'm thinking at this time I'm just going to save it for Philly.
What about Chicago and Whistler?
Whistler for sure, because that's like literally right in my backyard. And then Chicago, again, I have another race. Their survival race is happening. The one Fuego y Agua in Nicaragua. Mm-hmm. They're actually doing one in Squamish, which is just by Whistler there. So I'm signed up for that. So I'm probably, I'm like trying to figure out really what's happening with Chicago still. But I really would love to do all of them, especially just the North American circuit. But
So you're one of 7 women who have qualified as an elite contender for World's Toughest Mudder 2017. Will we see you in Vegas this year?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I bought my ticket the day after. I think, especially if you, like, I had that bad fall and the injury and I ended up just limping my way in. I think even the next day I was like, oh my God, it's 364 days away. Like, how am I going to survive this 364 days before I get to be able to get back out there and do it again? So I'm absolutely going to be at World's Toughest this year, and I'm just hoping it all fits together. You know, with a race, especially of that length, it's just like so many factors that go into it, and I'm just hoping that this year will be a lot smoother than the last couple of years.
In 2014, you finished in 2nd place. In 2016, you finished 7th. What are your goals for this year?
Podium would be nice. You know, it depends who shows up, but I think it would be really cool for the ladies to hit 100 miles this year. And I think that depending on the course and the obstacles, that it's definitely possible. So I think one of us should go for that, and the rest of us at least should push each other to that. And we'll just see where everybody ends up at the end of the day.
Allison Tai, is there anything else you want to say?
No, I feel like we had a good chat. I don't really think that there's much else other than thank you for having me on the show, and thanks for chatting it up about Toughest Mudder.
Special thanks to Allison Tai for appearing in this episode. Thanks, Allison. Also thanks to Eric, Melissa, and Jonathan. Well done, you guys. Don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes and subscribe to our winners list for a chance to win a pair of Merrill shoes or a ticket to Toughest Philly and Toughest Europe. See you next week. Thanks a lot, you guys.